Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Man, it feels like it has been forever since I've been on the podcast for some reason. I think it's because it's been like the whole holiday week
Yeah.
and traveling, and it just feels like I've been completely away from everything, man. But it's so great to be back and just talk veteran stuff on the military retirement podcast with you, John.
It feels like it's been forever since I've been on here. It's actually literally been forever, huh? It's
Yeah,
been a
just a little bit, man. But no, it's all good. Um, Thanksgiving, man. Would you do?
So we've started a new tradition in Thanksgiving. So overseas, generally, it's a really, really tiny military community here, an American community. And so what we did last year for the first time was we went to the galley, or the DFAC, if you don't know what the galley is, and
Hmm.
basically went there and hung out. And they make this huge Thanksgiving feast, and they put all the stuff out there, and then they kind of throw their own little twist of like Sicilian kind of things in there, and some seafood and things like that, lobster tails and weird things. So we did that last year. My sister was here. Ended up doing it again this year. Just me and my wife went, and that's kind of like our Thanksgiving tradition now for the time being. It keeps me from cooking a turkey and doing all kinds of craziness, and it's really cool to hang out, and she gets to try things that she's never tried, like eggnog. Like, who would think eggnog was such a hit? But she tried the eggnog. She was like, "This is really good. I really like this." But yeah, it's
Heck
pretty
yeah,
pretty good stuff. So that's
that's
kind of
good,
our
man.
Thanksgiving, and staying away from Black Friday, walking around at 2 in the morning stuff. I don't enjoy that.
Do people still go out for Black Friday?
I think they do.
Yeah.
I think they do.
So I
Yeah.
I know, like, I jumped all over, like, Amazon stuff. I know you sent me a text about it, about some stuff on Amazon, and, I went and I bought one of these, little Osmo things from
Ah,
Costco, which was so I had another one. I was within the 30-day return policy, and it was still in the box, so I was like, "You know what? Let me just return this one to Amazon," and this one was 300 bucks less at Costco.
really?
300 bucks less. I'm like, "Yeah, it's a
Oh,
no-brainer, man." It
it's
just didn't
like,
come with the external microphone, so I just ordered that thing. It was like Amazon resale or whatever. It was like 70 bucks. I'm like, "Whatever, I'll take that." So, and it didn't come with a little case, so I just used one of my own cases here. But
mhm.
all good, man. It was, yeah, a lot of that going on, a lot of Black Friday sales going on. And
I
dude,
should have just
like
sent
I
you all
went
my Black Friday money. You could have went to Costco for
You
me.
should have. Should have, man.
Missed
No,
out.
I went to Vegas for
Uh-oh.
Thanksgiving. So I have some family out there in Nevada, through my wife's side, on my wife's side.
Mhm.
And I've been to Vegas when I was like 20, in my early 20s, mid 20s. And it seemed like a cool spot, right? Because back then you want to go party and stuff.
Right.
Dude, I going back there, I'm like, I did not want to be on the strip anymore. I don't I didn't care for any of that stuff. Just the traffic was horrendous, man.
Huh.
I was so happy to get off the strip. My kids were all looking at the lights and stuff. Wow, this is amazing. New York, and Paris and all that. I'm like, no, I was worn out just driving down that street, dude. For
You're
real.
lucky it wasn't a couple of weeks ago when they had the F1 race there. It was like literally 2 or 3 weeks ago when
That's
they had
right.
the F1
So
racing.
funny enough that my wife's uncle he runs that whole F1 thing at the Wynn, right
Nice.
at the Wynn Hotel. So he was telling us all about it. And the day that we decided to drive on the strip was the day that they were starting to move all that stuff out of there. So
Mhm.
it was just insane, man. We moved like 100 feet in like an hour. It was terrible, dude. I just wanted to drive on the sidewalk and get the hell out of there. But
Yeah.
overall, Thanksgiving was good. It was just, full of family that I've never even met before on my wife's side. So that was fun. That was fun. Got to
Nice.
try out some
Nice.
new foods and stuff. Just it's always good to get with family on, during the holidays like that. But I don't know that I'll be going back to Vegas anytime soon. At least not to go party or anything. For family, it's fine. Partying, I'm done with that, man. I'm good without that.
Yeah,
You
I haven't
just
been to Vegas
outgrow
in
it,
a
right?
while. Yeah, yeah, you do. And we were literally talking about just like clubs and party and stuff like that the other day, and I was like, it's not my scene. It's not my scene at all. Like, even
Not
even going
anymore,
to
man.
a bingo night, right? Like, is kind of, it's almost borderline like risque in a sense, because it's just this, you get this kind of PTSD flashback of like being in a club. I mean, they don't turn the lights down. Usually they don't. But even
No.
that kind of scene is like, for me, it's just a little bit like I've done enough of that, had enough of that. But
Check.
if you do go to
Bingo.
Vegas, like
Over the
when I go to
top.
Vegas, I'm looking for any street taco stands that I can find. And I usually go to like the other side of Vegas, the old strip is where I usually hang out if I go there. That's where I like to hang out. It's more nostalgic. It's a little bit quieter, a little less crowds and a little less crazy. That's my ideal Vegas, is that side of the town.
Yeah. So I will say this, you brought it up and I'm going to go with it. And I'm probably going to catch some flack because I do live in San Diego and supposedly they have some really good tacos here. But man, we went to go eat at Tacos El Gordo
I gotta write
in
this down.
Vegas. You need to write that down, man. It's like a funky way of ordering food. You got to stand in certain lines, and then some of them have like carne asada, some of them have just quesadillas. You know, like each line has its own little thing that they do. But man, it was I think I had like 4 tacos and 2 quesadillas there, and the quesadillas are completely different from anything I ever tasted. If you're
really?
ever in Vegas, try Tacos El Gordo. It's so good, man. Like, yeah, I just kept going back for more orders. It was that good.
That's on Las Vegas Boulevard?
Yeah, right on the strip, right past, I think it's like Paris or something. It's right on a corner, and it seems kind of like dingy with the whole parking lot, but man, it's so worth it, dude. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely
I'm
try
saving
it
it
out.
right now. I'm saving it right now on my Google Maps, man. It's right there. I got it.
No, yeah, do it, man. Do it next time you're here.
Locked in. I should be there sometime in the summer. I don't know if it's like June, July, August, sometime in there. If you want to meet up, or if anybody actually wants to meet up, I should be around and I'll let people know. And whenever I'm heading back that direction, if we link up and we can maybe do a show there live together in person.
Yeah. Hell yeah,
It'd be
man.
kind of sick.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 hours for me, but you know, whatever. I'll make the drive. Shoot, I mean, it's probably cheaper just to fly out there. I don't like to drive. I don't like driving at all, really. Not that far. Just dealing with traffic and all that. But no, it's I'll take an easy flight over there. It's probably like an hour or so.
Yeah, it'd be sick. It'd be really sick.
Yeah, man.
Go find some street tacos.
Oh yeah. Why not?
Street tacos.
And I'm not a fan of the gambling either, man. I've never been a fan of the gambling. So I can't do that stuff.
Yeah, I can do it. I have this like mental limit that blocks me from like anything over $20. I'm just like, okay, cool. $20, I can lose $20, but anything beyond that, I can't do it. I literally sit and watch people now, since it's part of my job, is literally watch people play slot machines, and I'm just looking at them like, wow. Cool.
Just, yeah. People are losing everything on there, huh? Throwing down their TSPs up there.
Some people are actually walking out of there, but those are the ones that place the big bets. If you place the big bets, you win the big cash, and they walk out with thousands of dollars. I'm like,
no, I like to bet on myself, but not on not at the casinos though. I'm good without that.
I spend my money on camera gear and like microphones and stuff.
There you go. There's a smart man. Always got the gas.
Yeah, but yeah, holiday weekend, happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and happy Black Friday if that's what you're into. There's a lot of good deals out there. Like Victor mentioned, I sent a couple over, and some of those deals run through the weekend. And our book, unfortunately, is not on sale. It was on sale for Veterans Day, but not for this weekend, which maybe we can change that in the future, depends. But if you're looking for a good stocking stuffer for a veteran that you know who may be getting out of the military soon, you can go check out the book. You'll see the little QR code pop up on the screen there if you're watching this on video. And what is it, like $2.99? Get a nice little stocking stuffer for somebody and send it to them, and give them some good quality tips on getting prepared to get out of the military. If you know anybody in that situation, or your spouse, or like brother or sister or somebody like that, it's a nice little stocking stuffer for them. So
it is an incredible deal, man. Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it with a stick, man. Just to get information, 10 chapters of solid information on what you need to know before you leave the military for $2.99. You can't beat that with a stick, man. Get it now.
And that was the sponsor of our show, is ourselves. We sponsor our own show right now.
It.
So that's basically, if you want to help us to support us, that's how you can do it. Just go get that book, or if you want to throw like a super chat in there, if we're doing a stream or something like that, that'd be pretty sick too. But yeah, watch videos to the end and like and subscribe and all those wonderful things. So yeah, I'm going to check out my audio real quick because I saw a message.
Yeah,
So
no worries, no worries. And I'm pretty excited. So we have a guest coming up here, Kevin Brewer, and I was just doing a run through of his LinkedIn profile, and I have so many questions for this guy because he seems like he has together. He's lived all these lives. It sounds like a disabled vet to Spartan athlete. He lost 90 pounds in 15 months. I can't lose that in 15 years, man. I'm hoping to hear all about the story. And he teaches people how to do it. You know, he's a military mindset expert. And John, if you're ready, I'm ready to bring him up on the stage, man.
I'm all ready, man. Let's do it.
All right. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the Military Retirement Podcast, man.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Good. So tell me, man, how, like, what exactly is it that you do? I know you're a military mindset expert. What does that mean exactly?
So the way I like to explain it is that most people have a hard time sticking to things, right? And the reality is a lot of people can do things for like 2 weeks and then all of a sudden, life gets in the way or something else comes up. But
Right.
really is what's going on is that everything begins, continues, and ends with a thought. But most people put zero effort into learning how to control your thoughts. So I help people figure out how to be resilient and use their mind as a super weapon rather than something to deviate from where you're wanting to go in life. Because again, you have to think about wanting to do it. In the middle of it, say you're going to try to work out, right? Like you're working out and all of a sudden you go, man, this really sucks. How do you keep going and get through that? And then afterwards you do like an AAR, like, I'll tell you guys, AAR, like, was it worth it? Should I continue to do it? Well, if you can't overcome that thought process of no, I'm not going to continue, well, then there goes the habit. So there's a skill in there, and learning how to figure out how to master, navigating that and overcoming it more and more frequently and faster.
All right. So do you run like classes, or is it just online? Is it in person? So how do you run these things?
Yeah. So I do it online, mostly because that's where people are. But if you're near me, we can do it in person too. But it's not one-on-one, and either online or in person if you're close enough to me. And we just kind of go over your breakdown of your mental game, really. So it's rooted in sports psychology and performance psychology, and that's kind of how I got started with it, is going down that rabbit hole with this guy named Brian Kane. Then you kind of get into the guys like Jocko Willink and David Goggins, and going down that rabbit hole, and then just kind of figuring out like, oh, okay, I've kind of been doing this anyway all my life. Like, let me structure it now a little bit better.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as your own personal story, like I find it intriguing. I'm glad you reached out, and I think it's one of those stories that a lot of people struggle with, like whether it's a weight loss thing or whether it's overcoming some mental obstacles or some biological obstacles or even just everyday life kind of stuff. You get stuck in these kind of ruts, and you kind of start to dwindle down this path, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because like you said, you tell yourself these stories in your head, and then they just keep echoing around in your head until the only way to get out of it is kind of like break the pattern and break the story up. But for your own personal story, when you got to the point where you decided to start making a shift in your life, what was the thing that actually like triggered that? What was the kind of catalyst point for
that? So kind of going back real quick, in my childhood, I kind of grew up with an alcoholic father who was kind of abusive, and my outlet to overcome all that and learn how to be resilient and not let it affect my life was always through like sports or physicality. And then of course I joined the military, and same thing, right? There's a lot of physicality in the military. There's a lot of sports we can play, do all those different things. So that was always my outlet to be able to get my emotions and energy and my negative energy out, and then reset myself so I can get back into a positive direction and maintain my focus and forward progress, I guess. As I was transitioning out of the military, I got back from Afghanistan, and then about a year later, I got out. I was having a lot of health issues, and because the health issues actually took away my ability to be physical, I had no second game plan. So basically, because I couldn't get my emotions and my everything, my mind right, because I didn't have the ability to do it with the physicality anymore, I didn't know what the hell was going on. So for the next 13 years, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And as more and more doctors just kind of really dismissed me for the most part, didn't really help me out, I kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, mentally was getting harder and harder to continue to maintain that because I didn't have the ability to get it out. So finally one day, and we can get back into the actual health issues if you want, but effectively I was having really the symptoms and signs and symptoms of like a heart attack and stroke daily, like constantly. And so finally I was I've been in and out of the hospital multiple times, and I was in my closet one day having this again, and I just laid there and I said, fuck it, I'm going to die right here. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm just done. I'm done. And I'm not a particularly religious person, but I said, God, if you let me live through this, I'll, I don't know how this works, but I'll figure it out, and I'll start helping people try to figure out their life too. And of course, obviously I didn't die. So I said, I guess I got to figure it out. Right. Like, so I just started using my background, through the military and my, kind of job, my training as an analyst, and said, well, I don't know how to read MRIs, but I can look at two different things and say if they're the same. And then I can start asking questions anywhere anybody is willing to give me an answer. So I started doing that. I started looking at my MRIs. I started going on Reddit. I started going on Facebook. I started going to different places where different doctors were who didn't know me, who had no bias towards me, and started getting answers and figured out my own health problems. Got to a doctor in Colorado who could help me out, and made massive progress. In the meantime, I was 240 plus pounds. I was almost size 50 waist, so I was massive. Like, I gained a bunch of weight, because I just couldn't do anything physical, and I ate like I was still physical. So as I was going through this process, learning all these physical or these mental skills to learn how to get my mind under control so I can continue this path, I said, well, what can I control? Well, I can control my weight. If weight management is just food management, it's not about physical exercise. It's about eating right. So I started okay, well, I can learn how to get my sugar intake under control first. So I started there. It was just a simple thing of like, hey, I was working in an office. They had candy, cookies, cake, donuts everywhere, right? So I said, okay, well, every time I walk by, I say yes and I grab something. So one time a day, I'm just going to say no. And that's where I started, just one time a day. I'd walk by, I'd say, nope, not right now. And then the rest of the day, if I walked by and wanted it, I would have it. I wouldn't prevent myself from doing it. And I just kind of built that up. As that became easier, it was 2 times a day, and then 3 times, and then eventually a whole day. And then it was a couple times a week, and then it was the whole week. And just kind of built from there. And then I started this practice that I heard about from Okinawa. There was stop eating when you're no longer hungry, not when you're full. So I just started paying attention to that. And I just started realizing that usually it was quite a bit before I was full that I was no longer hungry. So I was able to basically do portion control by just paying attention to what the signals my body was giving me. And then in the midst of this, I started realizing I had somebody at work said something to me that was like, kind of really hit home for me. And she was like, yeah, you just got to change your relationship with food, because I always had this mentality like, well, I just can't have the same thing every day. And she's like, well, that's just a relationship with food. Like, you think you have to have that thing. I was like, well, damn, why'd you gotta punch me like that, man? Like, so I started like realizing, okay, maybe I can do something like that. So I started doing more and more of that. I started doing intermittent fasting. And so I went from 240 to about 190, doing all that. And then I started some of like I don't call them fad diets, but like lifestyle. So I did the plant paradox with Stephen Gundry first. I lost another like 20 pounds. Then I got into the carnivore lifestyle, got down to like 153. And I tell you, neither one of those, I mean, they're both good. They work fine. they're kind of hard to sustain. So I kind of found a balance within there that I like, that works for me. And really, it comes down to the reality is, and all of those eating styles work, but mostly because what they do is tell you to eat whole foods, mostly single ingredient foods, and things that are natural, right? Like get rid of the processed stuff as much as possible. And that's really it. Within there, you can almost eat whatever you want as long as you're not consuming well past when you're not hungry. And the reality is then your weight kind of takes care of itself. And also I realized that when you're eating whole foods, it is really hard to overeat because you do actually get full way before your body, you know, is or when you would normally get full, because your body's truly getting the nutrients it needs. And usually that your body's telling you you're still hungry is because you haven't met some nutritional need that it has. So it just keeps telling you you're hungry because there's some underlying nutrient you haven't provided it. So by eating whole foods, you end up getting that nutrient, and then your body's like, okay, we're done. We're good.
So Kevin, I know that's I know exactly what you're talking about with the processed foods, right? So in my office we have a soda mess, right? Like a ghee dunk, right? It's in the
Yeah.
kitchen. They got a bunch of like little snacks, and a lot of times it's to raise funds for whatever military balls or whatever, or fundraising, whatever they need to raise funds for.
Yeah.
But the amount of times I see people gravitating towards that, just like zombies, like brains, just walking into the kitchen to grab like a Fritos, or, my thing is Cheez-Its, man. I hate that I love Cheez-Its, but I love them so much. It's hard, man. With the willpower is a tough thing to overcome, right? It's the lack of willpower. Because when you're hungry, I'd rather reach for a Cheez-Its than say the orange that's at the bottom of my backpack sitting next to me, right? How did you overcome that willpower, or that lack of willpower when you were starting off your journey here?
Starting off, it was kind of complicated. So what I originally did is, again, I told you how I did the one time a day kind of thing, and I kind of worked through that. And then what I ended up doing was called Fatty Fridays. So I would do my best that I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to limit the amount of crap I'm going to eat, or I should say crap, right? Like really, it's that's kind of a judgmental word, right? Like we put weight to things like saying it's either good or bad. Well, the reality is neither. It's not really good or bad. It's just the weight we put to it. So
right.
I kind of changed that. First was like, it's okay, well, it's neither good or bad. Is it going to fuel me properly or not? And what I was looking for was proper fuel so I can drop medications, get my health, under control, those different things. So is that going to support my goal or not support my goal? And that's kind of where I started. And I go, okay, well, it's not going to support it. But I believe I still have this craving. I'll get to that in a second, why I say it that way. Is that, okay, well, I'll do it on Fridays so that I have something to quote unquote look forward to. So I'm not depriving myself per se, right? Like what I believed was depriving myself. I was just prolonging that till a different day. And then on Fridays, I would literally eat whatever the hell I wanted to eat. And I would just go wild, right? And then the rest of the week, I would just not do any of that stuff. Another thing was like, I would be more specific, right? So I was like, okay, well, when they would bring in donuts, for instance, I'd say, well, I will say yes to a donut if and only if it is a old-fashioned cake donut, right? That was the one I wanted. For whatever reason, a glazed old-fashioned cake donut. If that was in the box, I would say yes, I would have it. I wouldn't have no problems. That's what I told myself. If it wasn't there, the answer was no. It was pretty cut and dry, right?
Right.
A lot of people like that donut also. So it was frequently not there. But the times it was, I would just grab it and not feel bad because I made a statement. I'm going to do this or this, right? Like it was not maybe, right? Like, because there's this idea of like 99% is significantly harder than 100% commitment, right? Because if you're 99% even, there's still a little bit like, well, maybe, does this fit? Does that fit? No, there's a specific line I don't cross, right? And and if I cross it, I know I crossed it. Now I have, okay, well, I can break it down and try to figure out ways to defeat it next time. or I can just, say, no, I said, no, I'm going to stick to my word because I'm a man of my word. So that was the line. And at first, like I said, it was more like, well, my line was Fridays, I'm going to do whatever I want. Or if it was this donut or whatever, right? Like if there's a special occasion, and it had to be a real actual special occasion, because people make up things like, oh, it's the first of the month, or it's, whatever, like they'll make up some reason to have something, but it's like, no, is it actually someone's like birthday or something like that? So I'd have cut and dry lines where it's like, no, I would do it only on these days. That's how I went about it. But
I have a couple follow-up questions, actually a follow-up question and then a kind of a comment. You mentioned that you tried a bunch of different things, and I've done this as well. But my own personal journey with my health at some point took like a vegan cleanse for like 3 weeks, and I went from like 205, or maybe it was like 200 pounds, and I dropped down to like 177. I've never been that light since like high school. But it really changed my mindset because the very beginning of it was like, okay, here's step one: clean out everything out of your pantry, everything out of your refrigerator, throw it away completely, and start fresh from this particular list of things. Here's the things you can have. Here's the things you should keep on hand. This much water, X, Y, Z. I like that you mentioned that you tried a few different ways to do it.
Yep.
And you started to realize, and over time, like you were picking out the pieces that made sense for you, because I think the diets are great. A lot of them are really, really effective, but they're not a one size fits all, just like many things in life. And you have to kind of test them out, and not test them out for a couple of days and be like, oh, this sucks. But you have to actually test it out for like a few weeks, a couple months, figure out what's working, what's not working, pick those pieces out. And then if you move on to another version of that diet or another kind of diet and try that out, and you get the same kind of effects. But I did want to ask you, like, when you said you stop eating when you're not hungry anymore, what kind of physiological thing do you feel or experience that lets you know that? How do you know when you're not hungry anymore?
So it's going to be a little bit individual, but usually what happens is as I'm eating, a lot of people actually like use like, oh man, I'm starving, I'm really, really hungry, right? Like you have this like thought of like, man, I if I don't eat right now, I'm gonna fight somebody, right? Somewhere along the way, you get to a point where if you actually really think about it, you're kind of satisfied, and you're like, but you start going like, but I've always been told to finish my plate, right? To clear the plate.
Right.
So you'll get this feeling like, and for me, it was more like, I could continue eating and be fine, I think. But if I had to stop right now, I would feel comfortable, right? So I started to pay attention to that. I was like, okay, as I get along, I was like, do I feel comfortable enough right now? Like, am I actually like still, do I still feel physically, like mentally, even like that I'm hungry, like that I can't stop eating? And if the answer is no, even a little bit of no, I would be like, okay, well, I'm just trying to convince myself that I am, so therefore I'm not. So I would just pay attention to that. Like usually it's like like you start to feel a little bit heavy or something like that too. Like, so there's different feelings and sensations in there. So it'd be slightly different for everybody. But for me, that's what it felt like for me. Was I started thinking like I could continue, but if I had to stop right now, I'd be fine too. So then I was like, oh, that means I need to stop.
So did you ever supplement? And I'm sure you did, because I mean, we can talk about the Spartan races here, and of course you had to work up to that. But how much of it was diet and how much of it was working out? Because I've always heard, and having been in the military myself, you cannot outwork a bad diet. It has to be a huge part of your daily regimen, right? So how much of this was physical exercises versus dieting?
You're talking about the weight loss.
Right.
Talking about the weight loss in
Right.
general. 100% diet. I actually couldn't work out. I was like, so real quick, just to like quickly summarize what happened is it ended up being cervical instability. So effectively, every time I would look up or move my neck, really, that was effectively crushing my brainstem. So I had a lot of disparate symptoms all over through my body. So my nervous system was a train wreck. So I couldn't really go. By the end, I couldn't go from the couch to the fridge without having basically 12 out of 10 pain. If I looked up, I was basically paralyzed for a couple hours, and again, just head to toe sheer pain for hours. Panic attacks every single day, multiple a day. I couldn't get to and from work without having a bunch of ice pack. Literally, I was like sitting on ice packs, heating pad, and TENS machines. So I was in a really, really bad place physically. So I literally couldn't do anything. I was walking less than 2,000 steps a day. I could not work out one bit. So 100% of my weight loss was diet. And I realized then at that point that your weight control is 100% diet, and you build your body in the gym. So lifting weights, working out, all that stuff is just muscular control. The weight control is this diet and nutrition.
And I think the weight control actually allows you, because I noticed that when I mentioned the vegan cleanse thing, and I dropped down a lot of weight, and at that point I was doing a lot of exercise at the time, and actually like teaching exercise classes in the gym like 3 times a week. At that point, when I dropped the weight, I was able to actually run like my fastest 2-mile time ever. It was a handful of years ago, probably 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. So that dropping of the weight actually allowed me to train a little bit harder because I could move faster. I could do a lot more plyometrics and things like that. Now I can't do it, but I felt like the weight loss that I did, and again, it wasn't drastic. It was 20, 30 pounds or whatever, but it allowed me to then be able to put a lot more effort into my exercise regimen. And it also felt like it allowed me to, because I was doing a little bit of meditation at the time as well, to be able to actually process the anaerobic exercises that I was doing and breathe a lot easier, because I wasn't pushing up against, the mass of my body, even though it wasn't that much bigger. But it felt completely different. It felt like a completely different person when I did that.
So a couple things there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll say a couple things there is first off, so just to kind of, I don't want to backtrack necessarily, but say
no, go ahead.
The difference between working out and then not kind of thing too is if you're also working out, there could be, sometimes it could be detrimental because you'll think you can overeat. So it can actually help with the calorie consumption and burning to keep you in a deficit kind of thing. But some people take that to the extreme and go, well, since I worked out, I can eat an extra 500 calories. Well, no, not really. Right. So there was a little bit of dysfunction there because people believe that weight loss is controlled by exercise. So if you don't do it correctly in combination, then you could actually make it seem like it's not working. And John, to your point though, is with the going to the vegan and having more energy, it wasn't, I would say it's probably less likely that it was the loss of weight that allowed you to do those things, but you're getting cleaner energy. When you have clean energy, you don't realize how much of a difference that makes. For instance, when I first noticed this was actually in high school, my basketball coach in my sophomore year had mentioned don't drink soda and stuff during the season because it makes you slower, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, you're full of shit, whatever. But I was like, but you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong because, I knew everything as a high school, everything. It's like, I'm going to prove you wrong and I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to show you that it's not going to make a difference. Right. Well, I actually forgotten one day and I drank like a soda or something at lunch. And that was the worst practice I've ever had. I don't even know if it's reality. I just mentally felt slow. I couldn't do anything. I don't know if really it was true and people could tell, but I felt that way. And that was when I first realized that clean energy makes a big difference. And I noticed that now that when I when I travel, for instance, right, and I can't get as clean of food as I want because of, just lack of options, I have a harder time in the gym sometimes or doing different things. So I tend to try to find an Airbnb now so that I can buy my own food and eat the clean energy that I want to eat, because I just feel significantly better in terms of what I can and can't do. Because I've seen some really big guys do some really amazing athletic things that I'm like, man, how are you doing that? You're like 300 pounds. And it's like, there's like a clip on there and it's like a 300-pound guy doing like breakdancing. And I don't know if you've ever tried to do some of the breakdancing moves. I have a very new, profound respect for those people because that shit's hard. So seeing him do that, I'm like, yeah, I can't even do that. And I'm like, I weigh like literally half the person you are. So I would say that clean energy probably was a bigger thing, which then also then helps you then to lose more weight. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But people often associate it to the wrong thing. So then they don't know which one's working. So then they either stop all of it or they believe it's one, so they stop the other. And then all of a sudden what goes around, they think they did something wrong and then they get discouraged.
Mm. So I have a question about your carnivore diet because I've read so much about this. I see so much about it online. It seems to be like a popular thing, right? But I just have so many questions about it, and I've not personally done it myself. Just eat just meat all day. For one, I feel like your cholesterol will shoot through the roof, but I don't know too much about it. I've gotten blood tests before and I've seen my levels, but not on the carnivore diet. I'm curious to know, like, while you were on it, did you see any difference in like your blood levels, your cholesterol levels, anything like that?
So the big thing about the carnivore diet, first off, is really just like an elimination diet. So people who have a lot of skin issues, things like that. Same thing with veganism is really just like an elimination diet. It's not necessarily meant to be long-term forever for most people, right? Like some people, like they really have like very big, restrictions in foods they can eat. So you probably could do it forever. Now, if you think about it in terms of like your cholesterol, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm gonna say that, but there's been a lot of things come out recently showing that the level of cholesterol is actually the what they spout now is actually incorrect. There's this book called Christopher McDougall, Natural Born Heroes. He talks about this in there, how there's actually the person who did the study for the cholesterol actually falsified a lot of the evidence because he actually had a personal agenda wanting to say that caused heart disease. Because the Society of Crete, the nation of Crete, Cretians are, I don't know now that citizens were called there, but they have naturally high cholesterol, but their society has zero heart issues. So cholesterol itself doesn't cause heart problems. It's other things. So, and historically speaking, this nation would have eaten a lot more meat and things like that and had higher cholesterol overall. But it's relatively new to have as much heart disease in the society as we have, right? Like there was a lot of people historically there wasn't like a whole lot of heart disease. So it's a little bit of a misnomer that cholesterol is the culprit. It's usually other multi-factored things. There's other things going on. So that's just kind of a lot of the stuff that's been kind of coming out. So I didn't really necessarily pay attention to that. But to answer your question directly is no, I didn't see a difference in my blood levels. That actually just was all fairly stable the entire time. Nothing really changed in terms of negative. They stayed relatively the same. I just really started going, I stopped paying as much attention to someone like those things and going like, okay, and I started really just thinking about like, is my body feeling right? Does my joints hurt as much? Does, like, do I have some like weird foot pain, like different things like that? And there would be little things like that. Like all of a sudden I'd eat like say broccoli and my left foot would start hurting a bunch and I'd stop eating broccoli for a little bit. And my foot would stop hurting, just like stupid things like that. So I go, no, maybe have a little bit of a reaction to broccoli. So all those foods that they say are good for you aren't necessarily good for you, right? So like you have to kind of pick and choose. I should say pick and choose, test them out. And to John, your point, you got to give it a couple weeks. Like, so there's a couple reasons for that. Is one that like if you're eating all over the place and you're changing too many things, your body's not actually trying to calibrate; it's just trying to catch up. But two, what a lot of people don't understand is every 2 weeks your taste buds all die and new ones come in. So if you just keep up with something for 2 weeks, you will gain a new flavor palette, so to speak. So you may not like it now, but if you just kept up with it for 2 weeks, you may start to like it. I unknowingly did that, by the way, with coffee. I wanted to start drinking coffee. I always hated coffee being a military guy, which is really weird, right? But I decided I wanted to drink coffee because I know the potential health benefits from it.
Yep.
So I started it was like literally 50-50, like coffee, creamer. And then like every 2 weeks or so, I would do less and less creamer before I started drinking just black coffee. And now I understand why that worked. But yeah, so a lot of people don't know that. So if you just stick with something for 2 weeks, your flavor palette will completely change over. But also you'll give your body the ability to actually adapt to it, because there may be a slight reaction at first, and then it gets used to it and then goes, oh, this isn't as bad as I initially thought. And then it calms down, and then that problem goes away. So you have to give your body a little bit of time to adjust.
Yeah, that's an excellent point you bring up. That's also I think that's probably the hardest thing about dieting in general, is just trying to, when you're trying to diet, like say if you're going to a carnivore diet, that means you're eliminating all carbs of any kind, which is breads, rice, potatoes, like any kind of complex carbohydrates. I mean, you're going to get carbs from a lot of things, right? There's vegetables you get carbs from too, but it's a different kind of carb. But being able to isolate like a particular food or a particular substance in isolation of itself for 2 or 3 weeks, like that's a little bit harder, because people's agendas and people's time schedules change, and people's schedules are crazy. Was there ever a point in any of the stuff that you've done diet wise that you had to figure out or adjust to make room to be able to do that? And how hard was that for you to do at any given point of that journey?
Well, travel, for instance, for me, for a lot of times becomes cumbersome and problematic, because you have no control over what things are cooked in for the most part. So if you're trying to cut certain types of oils and things out, it becomes really, really complicated. So if you can get like an Airbnb and just go buy your own groceries, that helps a lot with travel. At first, it was really complicated going places like parties and things like that, and going to like work functions, because we're taught throughout life that you're just supposed to do those things, right? Like you just have to fit in and things like that. But the reality is those things are set up for the socialization aspect of it. And there just happens to be food around. So I actually just got comfortable saying, I'm not going to eat that way because of my health. I'm not going to judge you for anything that you're consuming. That's between you and your body, not me. But don't make me feel bad for choosing this lifestyle for me. So I would just go and say, like, I'm going to go, I will talk, I will converse, I'll do whatever. I'll hang out all you want, but please don't ask me to partake in the lifestyle that you're partaking in, because I'm not going to, and that's okay. If you have a problem with that, that's your problem, not mine, because I'm okay with it. So I just got really comfortable saying that. And the first couple times it was really hard and people didn't like it. But then eventually people just go like, oh, okay, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, that's just Kevin, right? So it became easier and easier. And especially around family, like I would just, like for instance, when I went back a couple of years ago when we found out my dad had cancer, I just went to the store and bought my own food. And when they were having all their different like fried foods and all the different things, I said, hey, can I just borrow your stove real quick? I'm going to cook my food and I'll come down and converse while eating the food that I want to consume. And nobody had a problem with it because I bought it myself. I didn't ask anybody to go out of their way to spend money on me. I said, I'll bring my own food. If you can just allow me the place to cook it. So that's how I kind of navigated it and helped myself out, because for me, I had to, because I had a lot of health issues I was overcoming too. And that was a big part of it. Like, I was on multiple rheumatologic drugs, naproxen, I was on methotrexate, I was on hydroxychloroquine. So I was on a lot of heavy drugs, and I was doing a biologic injection at one point. And just changing my diet and nutrition, I got off all of that. I was pre-diabetic at one point, and that's completely gone. I had GERD. and that's completely gone. So it wasn't negotiable for me to go do that. So the more you can have like a deeper feeling or need for it, the easier that becomes too. Um, so there's a lot of nuance in there from my part. Uh, there's ways people can navigate that even if they didn't have those issues, right? But for me, it was extremely easy because it was the only way I could not be in pain.
So, Kevin, I got a quick question, man. And I just want to get your feedback on this because this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. So when I was at, say, like, so I don't know, you can name any Marine base, right? When they're redoing, sometimes they're redoing the base, redoing the food courts. A lot of times they bring in these things like Cinnabon, or they bring in like these comfort food places, Pizza Huts. Um, Nothing really that I've seen that's very healthy, limited health conscious menu items. I'd like to know what your feedback is on that, or what your thoughts are on uh, the military right now and how they're looking at what the restaurants that they're putting in these installations. Could they maybe do a better job? And on top of that, you having been in the Navy, is there any way that you can think of that maybe the military could do a better job with nutrition for these sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, whatever it may be?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. On the base, it's I think it's just strictly for profit, right? Like nobody really cares. They don't think about it. But when I was in Afghanistan, for instance, it was probably the best I've ever seen in terms of like nutrition for me. So they had like you're basically eating salad and chicken like every single day, right? Like there was really not many other options. Like they just did chicken like 17,000 different ways, and there was always an option for salad. So I really ate fairly clean there, unexpectedly. And when I got back, I getting back into more ultra processed foods because again over there, like even with the sodas and stuff, like they had kind of the old school, like the way things used to be made was like real sugar and things like that. So it was actually like unknowingly to a lot of us relatively healthy ish, right? Like in comparison to the foods we get here in the US.
Yeah.
So if they would just pay attention to that and hold these companies accountable, first off, that would make a huge difference, right? Because like for you guys are, my age or older, that when we grew up eating McDonald's French fries, it was real potatoes cooked in beef tallow and only added salt. But if you look at the ingredients list of a McDonald's French fry now, it's like 75 ingredients. It's not, there's like nothing, right? Because they're no longer cooking in beef tallow, but they need that flavor. So they add a bunch of chemicals to get the flavor. So it's not the same food. It's a food-like product rather than actual food. And they put this stuff on these bases, and then you don't have any other option half the time. And if you think, if you're constantly doing that, eating that, it just perpetuates the cycle. So then it just like it really doesn't set you up for future success, And then they give you all these different medications to like quote unquote solve the problem. But if you can never get off the medication, you haven't solved the problem. But you're just telling these military members are like, hey, you can eat whatever you want, any kind of crap food, and then we'll just fix it with Motrin most of the time, right? Like, and then you get out, and then that's what you think is the only way to solve things, is just continue to like stop moving if something hurts and then take Motrin and then eat a bunch of junk food because that's what they give you on base. So it's a huge disservice, and like underway when I was in the Navy, kind of the same thing. It's just like, hey, whatever's the quickest and easiest and stores the longest. So like initially you'd have a bunch of salad and all these different things. Not that necessarily salad is the only way to stay healthy, but it was all fresher foods. So the first couple weeks underway, you felt pretty good. And then as the food gets more and more like heavily processed and preserved type food, you would have a harder and harder time towards the end of your deployment because you're eating crappy food. So again, when I got to Afghanistan, I had that completely different experience. Like I didn't even know it, but I just felt good the whole time. And then I get back to the US, eat the food here, highly processed, not controlling my diet. Like I just didn't even realize how much that affected me, both mentally and physically. So there was, I really wish they would pay attention to that and actually start putting on better, healthier options. And not in terms of necessarily like it has to be specific lifestyle, but just like real food, like whole foods, like things that can expire, right? Like if it can't, if you can put it on a shelf for months at a time, it's probably not the best for you, with the exception of a few like whole grains, like, that are like shelf stable by nature.
It's like eating an MRE or something at all times,
Right.
So like when I recently went to the pharmacy and I saw this, fairly older couple walking away with what looked like a shopping bag full of prescriptions. It
Yeah.
was an immense amount, right? I mean, I was over there for, Motrin, like you mentioned, and a couple other things, and nothing anywhere near what they had in their hands. But I'm wondering, like, are they picking up for the whole family, or just them two, or what? Um, and I'm thinking here, like the VA, right? The VA, they have this large budget. They're always complaining. People are always complaining about, the immense amount of money going towards the military or the veterans, right? I mean, I just read something on The Economist. It's titled "American Veterans Now Receive Absurdly Generous Benefits," and we could talk about that later. But I'm wondering, or have you even heard about this? Like the VA maybe ramping up a nutrition program similar to what you did, where you cured yourself essentially by eating better.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned you had a GERD. I have a rating for GERD, and I still feel it. And I've been trying to adjust my food intake and trying different things out. And maybe I haven't done it for long enough, like you mentioned, like 2 weeks. Let your body adjust to that stuff. I'm wondering, or if you've maybe even heard of something like this, the VA starting some kind of nutrition program, or maybe ramping it up a little bit more to help folks get off the meds and actually get their life in check. Have you ever heard of something like that?
I haven't heard of that one. No.
Okay. I think that would be, I mean, if anybody out there listening and from the VA is listening, that would probably be something great to start up. I mean, especially if VA wants to cut down on the meds and stuff like that, I think the nutritional piece would be an essential part to help folks, to help veterans.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And the thing is too, is like, I think when I first got into like the nutrition and stuff, like I was very dogmatic because like people get stuck on this, right? Like this is why people get so irritated with like saying like, oh, you're carnivore or you're vegan, all that stuff, right? Because people get very dogmatic saying like, this is the only way to eat because it worked for me.
Yeah.
But what I've realized throughout is that like, listening to different things and trying things out myself is that nutrition is so nuanced and it's very individualized. And there's no one way, there's no right way. There's multiple ways, like, right? Like there's different societies that like eat tons of, fats and they're live to 100 years old, right? Like there's people who eat tons of carbs and they live to 100 years old, tons of protein, they live to 100 years old. So it's not the food itself, it's the quality first. And then can you do it consistently? And that's really what they see in a lot of these studies is like all of them work if you work it, right? Like, do you stick to it?
Yep.
And they say like variety is the spice of life. Well, when in society, if in history, if you like say go back to like hunter gatherer time, when would we have had that big of a variety? We wouldn't. So variety is not what you need. You need real foods. Like the only reason you need variety is because you're eating food like products. So you need 10,000 things to get the supplements that one quality steak would give you if you ate beef from a cow that ate its natural diet, right? So there's a big problem with just that by itself. And then what I found too, and I'm not trying to like diss on doctors by no means, but I saw a lot of doctors over the 13 years, and most of them didn't know a lot about medicine. Western medicine is very good with acute care, very blunt trauma, things like that. They are horrible at doing long-term chronic problems, like these metabolic problems and things. They don't understand it. They don't believe nutrition. They don't believe in, like the whole meditation, the mindfulness, like having your mind help heal the body. But I'm telling you through my own experience and finding more and more people that have done it, that is a huge component to it. First and foremost, if you don't believe that you can get better, you never will, because your mind is way more powerful than you believe, right? Like, I could talk to you guys right now and just keep telling you over the next 20 minutes how much your left foot hurts, and eventually, without you even realizing it, you'll start realizing your left foot hurts, right? Because I'm just keep telling you that, and eventually you'll start believing it. So if I can do that, then why would I not leverage that power? Like, if I can leverage the food, the quality of the food, necessarily, the types. Because, like, for me, for instance, I track my food now just because I enjoy it, because I've noticed the percentage of in my intake matters for different things. So I eat like I eat a lot of carbs. I eat a lot of fats. I do about 40% of my intake is protein, about 30% is carbs, and 30% is fats. But I know a lot of people that they can alter those. Like, for me, for instance, like, I can't do more fat, because if I do higher dietary fat intake, I start having stomach issues again, like urgency issues, things like that. So, but if I go too low, I start getting brain fog. I start getting all the things, because dietary fat regulates hormones. So if you lower fat, you don't get the hormonal regulation in your body. So then you start having all these other issues, right? And to your point about GERD, for instance, by the way, is what I actually realized too. I helped another friend get off antacids because he had the same issues for so long. He just kept getting more and more antacids. The problem is, oftentimes it's actually not too much acid. It's actually not enough acid. So you're actually getting more bile and not enough acid. So the pH levels are actually off. So what I noticed for me is I stopped eating things like tomatoes, things like that. But also, when I increase my dietary fat intake too much, I'll start getting some of those symptoms, because the bile is what breaks down fat. So I'll get too much bile in my system, and then I'll start having that reflux. So if I lower that, keep that at a certain level, then I don't have the problem. So there's a lot of like misconceptions out there too, that people are like, "Oh, this is the problem." It's like, well, maybe, because again,
I have noticed when I eat certain things, it'll start flaring up, and especially when I'm kind of eating something, like especially at work, right? Sometimes I'm trying to push through something, work through lunch, so I can get out maybe a little bit earlier, 30 minutes, an hour earlier. And I'm sitting there, and I don't drink sodas. I don't like them. I used to a long time ago. But certain things I'll eat and I'll feel it as I'm sitting down. And it feels like, I don't know if it's the GERD, but it feels like a pain right there in the middle of my chest, right under my chest, right by my rib cage. And I'm like, I always have to stretch up. I'm like, oh man, what the hell is that? And I think I may be eating the wrong things, right? Or maybe something I'm mixing in there. So I like that you are your own test dummy, right? I mean, for lack of a better term, you are your own guinea pig, and you're figuring out what works for you. And, I think I need to do that myself, because I'm so used to eating like maybe oatmeal and whatever in the morning. And I did recently find out that I love walnuts in my oatmeal. However, the walnuts are now starting to itch the back of my throat. And I'm like, maybe that's not something for me. So I need to cancel that out and maybe put almonds or pecans or something like that. Just figuring things out. I'm starting to do my own test dummy thing. So I'm liking that you mentioned that. Another thing, you spent some time in Japan.
Yeah.
You spent some time in Okinawa, you mentioned, right? Okinawa, they have some of the longest living folks ever in Okinawa. I think John and I have talked about this before, the blue zones, right? And how Okinawa is one of the blue zones. And so is, I think, parts of Italy. There's a spot over here in Southern California, Loma Linda. That's yeah, exactly that. You brought that up there. And I won't steal your thunder, John.
No, you're good.
Thunder. I mean,
no, not at all, man.
No, but I'm very curious. Like, have you done any research on the blue zones, Kevin? And having been in Okinawa, seen how the Japanese are big on eating until you're satisfied, not until you are completely full, and just looking at how American culture is with overeating, supersizing things versus the Japanese culture. Have you ever done any kind of research on that?
A little bit, yeah. So when I was starting this project, that's kind of why, like, why I tried the different things, different variations of the diet. So it's kind of doing that. And then I started looking into that, which is why I just said, hey, I'm going to find a different balance, find what's right for me. Because what I noticed is that all those different blue zones spike in different things. Like, so for instance, Okinawa or Japan in general, right? They eat a lot of starch. So they eat a lot of sweet potatoes, rice, things like that.
Yeah.
Almost every single meal. So they eat a lot of starch and seafood, which is pretty heavy in fats, right? Dietary fats. And they're completely healthy and fine. There's nothing wrong with it, right? So, but there's other places like you talk about in Italy, they eat a lot of grains. But everything they eat in those blue zones is it's all locally grown, made fresh, picked fresh. They do it all there. The other thing between those zones that are actually the only similarities is they move a lot. So they do a lot of walking, things like that. And they socialize a lot. People misunderstand the power of socialization, right? So even just things like this, human connection, we're pack animals, right? Like if you ever notice, like you're on an interstate, for instance, right? And you're driving and there's like not a lot of cars around, but as soon as you see a bunch of cars or some cars in front of you, like what do normally people do? You tend to speed up to catch up to them, right? And then you usually stick with them for a while. That's because we're naturally pack animals. We want to be around other people, whether we realize it or not, whether we want to pretend like we're, like introverts or whatever. We kind of want to be around other people naturally. That's a normal thing. Now, some people get more energy than others while they're with people, but that's a different story, right? But generally speaking, socialization helps us, like our nervous system, everything calm down. So when we don't have that, it becomes very easy to do all these other things like overeat and do all stuff because you're not actually doing what your body needs, right? Like your mind, your soul, like you're not taking care of you as a human being by avoiding all these other things. So I think there's a lot to that, which again, a lot of people missed out in the military, right? They just say, well, the biggest thing people say when they get out of the military, I miss the camaraderie. That's socialization. Like you miss the socialization, the common goal, the common, to be able to talk about something you haven't, like all the different things. Like whether it was difficult or not, you have that ability to sit there and bullshit and do whatever. So when you get out, you don't have that because a lot of civilians don't have that like group mentality, so to speak. Or if they do, it's all online or it's like some radical thing, like a group identity of politics or whatever that becomes like a us versus them thing rather than like, hey, a group mentality of to bring us together so we have something common to talk about and grow about.
I actually want to ask you, because you brought up a couple of really good points and through the conversation to kind of pick this out. Two things actually. One about the socialization thing, about how your social circles and like the groups of people you hung out with maybe prior to making this transformation and then after making the transformation, has that group changed? How have you kind of restructured that group of people that are around you or the people you socialize with? And then as a secondary question, you can get to it later or however you want to tackle it. When you're actually reaching out, like say if you're watching this or listening to this right now and you're like, you know what, I think I need to make a change in my life for whatever reason, and you're trying to figure out how to consult with doctors, which doctors would you want to consult with, and what kind of questions would you ask those doctors to get the right kind of answers back?
So in terms of the socialization in your social circles and stuff, like a lot of people actually have a hard time with self-development and achieving, becoming their best self because they think it's almost indoctrinated into us to like say like, well, if because as you better yourself, so to speak, right? Like a lot of people will almost try to bring you down. That sound like, oh, you think you're better than us now? Well, no. I'm just a different person, right?
Better than I was yesterday.
Right. And because you're not achieving growth, I'm not trying to be a dick, but you no longer serve a purpose in my life, right? And I think people have a hard time with that because they get stuck on like, well, I used to like that person, but well, you used to because you liked who they were at a certain point in their life. But they no longer serve a purpose, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like I'm not trying to diss them. You shouldn't diss them. Like they're just no longer the person you need in your life, right? So they were there for a season. Thank them for their service and your growth and your development and how they helped you get to a certain level, but then just casually move on, right? Like, you don't have to like tell them like, oh, you're no longer a part of my life. Well, they will eventually just fall off, right? Like, if they keep asking you to go party, and I think you mentioned that that's not your style, right? Like, I'm not that person either, right? So like, if they just continuously ask you to go party and you say no, eventually they just stop asking you and they just move on themselves. So people have a hard time with that because we're indoctrinated, and it's like, well, especially with family, right? Like, we're just told like, you have to put up with somebody treating you like shit because blood is thicker than water. Well, the real saying is actually the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the veins, right? So it's really the family you make is better than the family you're born into, or stronger, because you have a common purpose, right? I don't have to put up with your shitty behavior because you're my relative, whatever it is, right? So you no longer serve a purpose in my life. I'm going to move on. So I have to be able to do that. Well, the hard part is that as soon as you move out of one circle, right, like, you're not quite into the other one yet. So you have a little bit of time in this kind of like no friend zone, so to speak. That's like a lone zone. And people are really uncomfortable with that. So you have to just understand, like, no, I just haven't found my new group yet. I just have to continue to progress and build myself, and eventually I'll find those people, like by doing things like this and different, getting into different aspects, finding those people who are having similar likes, finding some kind of activity and talking to people there. Like, you get back into the weight room, for instance, right? Talk to a bunch of people in the gym. A lot of them have the same goal as you now, better themselves in some way, shape, or form. And all of a sudden you can build that relationship and it starts growing. So there is a little bit of a transformation there, and that people get super uncomfortable with, because again, we're indoctrinated to think that like, well, if I change too much and change my friend group, then I'm just like telling I'm literally saying I'm better than you. No, I'm just different now. Like, I'm no longer that person that needed that relationship. I'm this person needs this relationship, and that's okay.
You've outgrown that, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
again,
great metaphor for getting out of the military too. I mean, it's the same thing that
Yeah.
happens, but it's forced. And you're saying in a not forced way, this is the same kind of thing that happens, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And again, you thank the military for what it did. It gave you a lot of skills. It gave you a lot of, ability and leadership, different things, like a lot of discipline, all those different things. Now you just have to use that to better your life in another way, right? Like a different aspect. And again, it's okay. That's actually, I want to bring that up, because I think you guys talked about a different episode. Because I think one thing people have a hard time when they get out of the military is like, well, I'm in the military, I'm a warrior, right? I'm a fighter, I'm do this, I'm going to get, protector, all those different things. And they get out and they're like, I don't know how to handle that because I'm not in that role anymore. You can still be a warrior. It just looks different. I'm a warrior for peace. I'm a warrior for, whatever, justice in some way, shape, or form. Like, hey, I'm gonna do something for the community. I can fight for the community's ability to, I don't know, have a good playground, whatever it is, right? Like, teach the children, teach the youth, teach the teens, coach somebody, right? Like, that's still a warrior mentality. Like, I'm still fighting to better society. It's just in a different form, right? So like, if you can find a way to socialize that and get it into your lifestyle, right? Because we go in the military because we're servants, right? We're servant leaders. So you just have to find a way to serve in a different manner. Again, whether that's giving back to the youth, church, whatever it is, like, be a warrior in that aspect rather than a fighter, a physical fighter.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. So, Kevin, I wanted to ask you, are you like a nutritional coach or anything? If you're not, you probably should be, because you gave me a ton of information here that I'm looking into. But I'm just curious, do you have any kind of certifications or anything like that?
Not in nutrition. I looked at doing that, but a lot of them, like, again, kind of get into the dogmatic side of it. And I was like, nope, this isn't me. I just don't align with these values. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to teach people the way I want to teach them. And so I do more like mindset, mentality, resilience, but it's a kind of a total package, right? Because I can't get your mind right if your nutrition isn't right. Because one thing a lot of people don't understand is like 80% of your serotonin is made in your stomach. Like, your stomach's really like a second brain. It's got millions of neurons. People don't realize that. Like, your stomach's talking to your brain constantly, right? So if you don't have your stomach healthy, your brain is not healthy. So in order to help you be your best self mentally, you have to be your best self, like nutritionally. So that's a big aspect of it, is getting that under control. Is, and they go hand in hand, because it's really hard, as you guys talked about, like mentally, to get things to eat right. But if you don't eat right, it's really hard to get mentally. So it's like, well, which one do you do first? Well, whichever one you're going to respond to first, right? Like, that's where we'll start.
Absolutely.
Like, so there's different ways, but no, I kind of tackle all of it. I also, expect people to train every day. That doesn't mean you got to go out and do, 2 hours worth of working out. Like, hey, you know what? If you can just do 20 push-ups, that's training. But you should need to be moving every day, right? Like, because we're physically capable of doing that. We're meant to do that as human beings. We're meant to move. And if you're not moving, then you're not being a human. So that, you have to reconnect to that as a person first. And then it starts getting you go, oh, I can do a lot more than I realize.
Yeah. That's something I tell, like, I have kids, right? And I tell my kids all the time, just get off the video games all the time. You've been given this gift of your legs working, your arms working compared to other people out there, right? Go out and do something with it. Go run, go ride a bike, go do something, right? I mean, even adults too, right?
Yeah.
So I've always heard that your gut health is directly linked to your mental health. And it sounds like you believe the same thing, right? I mean, what you eat, it affects your entire body, both mentally and physically. Just a few questions on, what your thoughts on probiotics? Do you currently take any? And as a 41-year-old man, should I still be eating Flintstones vitamins?
Probably not on the Flintstones, but not because of the vitamins, but mostly because they're probably not the same as when we grew up. I'm 41 also, by the way.
Yeah. Right on.
I do. It's called Icelandic Skyer, Skyre.
It's like the yogurt, huh? Almost.
Yeah, it's good. It's fine. It's kind of a mixed opinion out there about if you should or shouldn't do probiotics. I mean, if you mix in like some kind of yogurt or cottage cheese, sauerkraut, things like that, like different foods, like that have natural probiotics in them, like that in theory that's supposed to help you. I don't think it necessarily makes a difference, personally. I think honestly, if you just get the whole good quality foods, it pretty much kind of takes care of itself. That's just kind of like an added benefit, I think.
Right.
So I wouldn't go out of my way to incorporate it if it's not something you enjoy. But if it is something you enjoy, then yeah, it's fine. Like, again, kimchi, something like that, like sauerkraut. Homemade sauerkraut, right? Like, especially if you can do it yourself. The more you can make yourself, the better. Like I said, any kind of like yogurts and stuff. But and here's the thing too with the yogurts. If you get the fruit in it already, like all the stuff that's like preloaded with a bunch of extra sugars and stuff, like it's not the sugars that's the problem. It's what they're using in the types of sugars and stuff. So get the plain stuff and just put honey, raw honey or 100% maple syrup in there. I use a lot of honey and maple syrup, and I'm perfectly fine, right? Like, I use a lot, and so there's no problem with sugars, so to speak. It's the quality of the sugars. Again, that's the bigger problem. So get the Skyers or yogurts, whatever, and put your own maple syrup or honey in it to sweeten it to whatever level you want to, and it's going to be better for you, because those have added benefits of different enzymes and natural things from the plant or from the tree or the bugs, the bees that's making it, that we also need, so.
That's good to know.
I think John's trying to talk, but nothing's coming through from my side.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was on
there you go.
If I could circle back. If I could circle back to that second question, and it's my fault for asking two big long questions in one gulp. But the second question I was asking about if you're in the situation where you feel like you're ready to make a change and you're trying to reach out to medical professionals, doctors, and trying to figure out like your blood your blood work and all that stuff. Which doctors would you recommend somebody going to if they're looking to increase their nutritional health, and what kind of questions that they would actually be able to ask those doctors to get the right kind of answers? I think we kind of.
I've actually not found a medical doctor that was really good with nutrition, to be honest with you. I was born with psoriasis. I saw multiple rheumatologists, and not a single one of them ever talked to me about eating properly for psoriasis. But the one I've seen recently, or the not the rheumatologist, what is it called, the dermatologist I've seen recently, well, asked me how I got rid of my psoriasis, and because it's mostly under control through diet. And I was like, oh, I just changed the way I ate. She's like, oh yeah, food's medicine. It's like, well, why didn't you tell me that before? So I think doctors are really, really bad typically at nutrition. So, and a lot of doctors now jump straight to medicines because they have deals with different pharmaceutical companies.
Yep.
Me personally, what I ended up doing is I had to get out of the insurance system. So and unfortunately, if the place to get people who actually want to get you healthy is outside of insurance, because they actually want to get, see you healthy, not just continue to keep you in the system, right? Because the medical system now is mostly set up to keep you in it. So if I give you this medication, it's going to cause these side effects for different problems, and I'm going to give you this one to fix that, and then I give you this one to fix that. So it perpetuates the problem. But here's the problem with medications is if I can't ever get off of it, with a few exceptions, right? Like if you're born with, like, say, type 1 diabetes, right? Like if I can never get off the medication, you haven't, either figured out the problem, but you definitely haven't solved the problem. So you're probably talking to the wrong doctor if their answer is constant medications. You could try naturopaths, like somebody who's kind of outside of that. Again, they're outside of the typical medical system. Some of them get kind of out there, but the whole, really far off the. So it is a little bit of a mixed bag. You have to have a little bit of sense of, you're like, all right, do I really feel that comfortable? Like, so it's kind of, you kind of have to take it on yourself a little bit to go like, okay, like I mostly believe what they're saying, so I'm going to try some of these things, like, and then like I don't know if I quite want to go down that, So there's a little bit of nuance in there. A lot of it is for me, for instance, like is literally just about feel and sensation, right? Like I could tell as I fixed my own nutrition, my body was hurting less. So then I just started lowering my medications on my own, and then eventually stopped taking them. But the doctors wanted to keep me on them. So it was really hard. When I got to for the cervical instability problem, I got to a doctor that does stem cell work, as a pain management doctor, but he's into stem cell therapy. It's all out of pocket. He didn't try to push anything on me, but again, I'm paying him out of pocket to fix me. Yeah. So his whole goal is to actually get me better, but I pay for it like heavily, right? Like, so there's a little bit of give and take there. If you can find a really good physical therapist, like I have one that's outside of insurance, he does like the whole, you can try to get reimbursed through your insurance. But again, even with physical therapy, when you get, and I say this, right, a lot of it is insurance based. Insurance doesn't want to see you get healthy. They want to see you get well enough to maintain some kind of level of proficiency, right? If you go to physical therapy, for instance, they will make the physical therapist stop you when you get functional enough to not have to have it, right? Even if you still kind of need it, they're like, well, you're functional enough. And then you can't get coverage. And also, like, say, if you go in there for like your shoulder, but the problem is really your ribs. They're just not moving properly. Insurance will not allow them most of the time to do anything about your ribs because you're there for your shoulder. You got to make a separate appointment for your ribs, but you may not be able to get a prescription because maybe the doctor doesn't believe you that that's the problem. So that's what I was running into a lot of times, is we had to either kind of lie or try to figure things out. Like I had a physical therapist that was actually kind of helpful, but she was like tiptoeing the line of like, I'm going to get in trouble here. So now I just have one that comes in my house. I pay him out of pocket and we can work on whatever we want. And I get more time with him too. And it's significantly better because we can just work on what I need rather than what the insurance says we can. So I know that didn't really answer the question per se and in a positive direction necessarily, but if you're going to stay in the medical system, try out different doctors. If they do not allow you to ask questions or continuously shut you down and tell you just how wrong you are and want to tell you how smart they are not the doctor for you. If you can't question them, they are not going to help you. They just want to be right. So that was a big thing for me, is I just started finding the doctors that allowed me to actually ask questions and they would answer the questions. And when they didn't know, they would actually say, I'm not real sure, you can try this and help me get somewhere else. So there was a couple, I'm not going to say they're all bad, right? I did have a couple in there that were like really good and very helpful in that manner. They just didn't have the answers I needed. So if you can't question them and you can't ask them questions, and if they never say, I don't know, and try to help you get somewhere else, they're not telling you the truth. That's just the reality of it. Like they're just trying to be right. So that's some tips I would say if you're going to stay within the medical system is just pay attention to that. Like, are they allowing you to ask questions, and do they ever say, I don't know?
That's good. That's good. Kevin, what is the name of your organization that you run?
Rise Again from the Struggle.
Rise Again from the Struggle.
Yeah.
What is, I'm curious, when somebody comes on, say you have a new client and a new customer, somebody you're working with for the first time, what is the first thing that you tell them? Like, hey, you should be doing this after the introduction. Or like what happens after the introduction?
So I try to stay away from hard words like should, could, have to, things like that. Frequently what the problem is we want to pretend we're rebels against everything. So when we tell ourselves we have to, should, must, all these different things, we fight ourselves more because that's the way we are. So what I start with is just share awareness. So I go through this traffic lights system, red, green, yellow, red, where it's just like body language, focus, and self-talk. And you just go through and say, okay, when I'm in control of everything, when I feel the most on, what does my body language look like? Is my shoulders back? Am I carrying myself properly? Like, am I, have a little bit of a arrogance about me, right? Like all those different things. Am I, standing wide, big body, things like that. Where's my focus and attention? Like, what am I paying attention to? Am I dialed in? And what am I saying to myself? Like, what is the language I'm using to myself internally, or even if I'm saying it externally? What does that sound like? And then you go into the yellow light as I'm starting to lose control a little bit, but I'm still kind of in control, but not fully. What does that look like? Like my shoulder starts slumping a little bit. Do I start, am I starting to pay attention to the things that are going wrong by just what's going right? Am I starting to say like, I don't know about this. Like, I don't know if this is going to happen. You're starting to use language that's like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to happen. This is going to happen. And then red light, when you're completely out of control, like you're just, slumped over, like your body language looks like shit. Everybody can look at you and go like, man, that dude is out of control. You're just, the only thing you can focus on is everything you see is what's going wrong. You're telling yourself, I suck. I'm an idiot. I'll never be able to do whatever, like all these different only negative things, right? So the first thing really is it's like, one, identifying that for yourself. And then just taking like a week or two of just going like, all right, I don't need you to try to fix it, but I want you to pay attention to when those things start to shift, right? Because if I can start to make you see and feel when those things are happening, then we can figure out, one, what's causing it most of the time, and then two, give you a strategy to start shifting that properly, right? Because oftentimes, like when we try to shift it, we go like, "All right, get it together, you stupid bitch," like whatever, right? Like we talk negatively to ourselves. Well, how often does that work, right? Like only that's, like you have to be in a really specific mood for that to really actually help out.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it just causes more problem, because when we don't turn it around immediately, then we get more pissed off, and then I'm mad at myself, so it just like spirals even further, even faster.
Mm-hmm.
And the sooner you can catch it, right? So like if you catch it as soon as you slip out of green, it's a lot easier than if you're in red, right? So just paying attention to as those things shift, we can get a strategy, build that strategy. And as you start to build that strategy, then you start actually digging in deeper and going, okay, well, what's really going on? Where's the different aspects of your life this is actually cropping up? And you start attacking those individually. And then usually what happens is you start to realize it's only a couple of things, that like a bunch of limiting beliefs that you've had from childhood that you just never questioned. And then as you build up the knowledge, you're going like, oh shit, this just keeps coming up. Now I can go, okay, well, look, now you're aware of it. You can either continue to make the choice to go down that negative path, or you can decide to go down this other path. And usually just going like, oh, I can actually just make a decision. Like you can really, get it. It takes a while because one, people, they have to start getting comfortable enough to like really open up. Like I don't really like the word vulnerable, because I think basically uses it to go like, oh, you didn't mean vulnerable. People get weird because it's like a safety thing, right? Like, oh, if I'm vulnerable, then you're going to use it against me, and but here's the thing, right? This is why I don't like to use it. If I'm your enemy, I already know your vulnerabilities. I've studied you. I know how to set you off. I know how to defeat you, right? Like we're all military. That was what we did. We looked for our enemy's vulnerabilities. We tried to find them. I know how to poke it. I can, say one word to you right now to set you off like a flaming, tamale, right? Like I can just piss you off in any way, shape, or form, and I already know it. I already know your vulnerabilities if I'm really trying to go after you. So I don't need you to be vulnerable. I just need you to be authentic and honest, right? And if you do that, well, that vulnerability stops being a vulnerability because you're actually going to address it. It's only a vulnerability because you refuse to address it. Oftentimes, you tell that in the military bases. Well, oftentimes the vulnerabilities you had as a unit was because you allowed it to be, because you wanted to be stronger somewhere else. But you could address it, but then you have to weaken something else, right? Like, so it's a kind of give and take. But if you're trying to self-develop, right, like you have to just be authentic about it and open and go, okay, well, yeah, this is maybe what's going on. Let's address it. And not just like, I don't really like talk therapy. I don't think it really works for most men, especially because men are solution oriented, right? Like I can sit here and tell you about my problems, but if I don't know how to solve it, then all I've done is recreated a bigger sense of need to fix the problem, right? Like, and we just perpetuated the cycle of like, I need to fix it, but I don't know how. I need to fix it, but I don't know how. So it's all solution oriented. So this conversation's all become solution oriented. I don't necessarily have to have this conversation about the problem and tell me all your feelings and emotions. No, like I only need to know what feeling you're craving to fix so that we can find a different route to, like get to that feeling and emotion, satisfy it in a different way.
That's excellent, man. I mean, that was a hell of an explanation, but I do like the red light, green light, yellow light way that you explained that. That does make a lot of sense to me. I've not heard that before, but yeah, when you explain it, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. And to give you an example real quick, just to kind of, nail the head of the nail in is when it comes to nutrition stuff, for instance, in May, I went back to Illinois for my nephew's graduation. And as we've discussed, my nutrition's pretty dialed in. And they brought out cupcakes. And I was like, for whatever reason, I looked at those cupcakes and I was like, man, I really want a damn cupcake. Like, what is going on? Like, I had a craving like that in a long time.
It's not even Friday. Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah. And I was like, man, what is going on? And I was there by myself because my wife had, she's a realtor. So she had a bunch of showings and listings and everything. So she couldn't go. And I realized that the cupcakes looked like something she had made in the past, when I was doing that stuff, and she makes really good cupcakes. So I was like, man, I really want one. But everybody there was like, no, these things are actually not that good. They're, pretty dry, blah, blah, but I was like, still like, man, I was like intensely craving it. So I was like, man, maybe I just need some food. Maybe I'm just hungry. So I started eating some fruit. I started eating some, like some of the loose meat sandwiches or whatever. And it wasn't really doing it. So I just started texting my wife. And I was like, hey, man, I don't know why. I was like, I just like really craving these cupcakes, right? Like I just go and I was like, I don't, So I started like
Can't stop thinking about them.
I started chatting back and forth with her. And then slowly but
Send
surely,
cupcake emojis and shit.
yeah. But slowly but surely, I stopped craving the cupcakes. I actually didn't want one. It didn't even cross my mind after about 5 minutes texting with my wife. What I realized in that moment was I didn't give a shit about the cupcakes. I craved the feeling and emotion I was seeking was intimacy with my wife. The cupcakes reminded me of my wife. It had nothing to do with the cupcakes. So even if I ate one, it would have never satisfied what I was looking for, because the craving I had was for intimacy with my wife, having that moment. So having that conversation with her satisfied the craving of the cupcake, and I no longer wanted the cupcake. It had nothing to do with the food. It was the person I was seeking, the emotion, the feeling I was seeking underneath. And once I satisfied that in a proper manner for me, it went away. So that's kind of like,
yeah, that's crazy how that worked out. The food was psychological, huh? It made you think of a past time, maybe. Yeah, that's crazy how that works. Wow.
And I think for cravings in general, for instance, like I think we're indoctrinated from that as kids, right? Like we're told to celebrate, you need pizza and cake, right? Because every birthday since you can remember had pizza and cake, right? Like, so it's been like we've been indoctrinated into, I use that word just because it's easiest for people to understand, to believe that thing, that's what we need for satisfaction, for celebration. So we get quote unquote addicted to flour, these substances, right? Because that's just what we've used to say how to celebrate. So if you can find a way to celebrate in a different way, tie a different different action to that emotion, it's really easy to break that. So that's actually, to kind of really go back. That was what I said when I initially started. Like, I thought, when I was doing like the sugar cravings, I didn't understand that aspect of it, of how we were basically told since childhood that this is how we celebrate. So now that I understand that, it's like, oh, okay, I can just find a different way to celebrate. And it doesn't have to include that, because the celebration is the people, not the food.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kevin, my kids are going to hate me now because we're going to have beef and broccoli for their birthdays.
Yeah.
No more cake. Blame it on Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
it's actually interesting you say that too, though, because there was I forget who it was. I saw somebody recently talk about that. They went over to Japan and they noticed the kids in the classes were asking, like I said, hey, what's your favorite food? And like a lot of them saying like either rice or broccoli or this or that, right? Like all these kind of what we would consider healthier foods. And the guy was like, why are they saying that this is their favorite food? And the teacher was like, she had no idea that was weird, because that's what they celebrate with over there is healthier food. They don't allow their society to have those other foods as celebration, because the higher the emotion that you're tied to something, the more we're quote unquote addicted to it, right? Because then we tie that emotion to that thing. So then we seek that thing to fulfill that emotion. Well, they just don't allow it from the beginning. So those kids will sometimes get those things, but it's not tied to that celebratory emotion.
Well, not just that. I mean, if you look at the way not to get off topic and go down a rabbit hole, but if you look at like just the children's like lunch menu programs in a lot of Asian countries, Japan, Korea, even parts of China, like they have like legit cooks in there making legit meals with legit food, versus what we serve in the States, or at least we used to serve. I don't know how the food school programs work.
It's not that good anymore, man.
No,
it's probably still not that great. But if you go to some of those Asian countries like Korea and Japan and places like that, like look at their school food programs, it's completely the opposite of what we do. Like they have regular meals that have vegetables and meat and all these things in them, and it's real food.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, dude, like we were amazed when I took a trip to Kyoto when I was stationed out in Japan. Kyoto's an old city, has old hotels, right? We stayed at a traditional hotel, like old school with like the tatami mats and all that stuff.
Mm.
Really cool experience. And it had breakfast included. You know, my kids here are for breakfast, I'll cook them some bacon and eggs in the morning, you know, maybe with some toast or something, or like a loaf of French bread. Um, and the breakfast there, they uncovered those, you know, big buffet things that they have, and they're like, "What is this fish? You know, what is this? You know, these little starches, whatever that like the what was it, sweet potatoes and stuff." And they're
Yeah.
like, "Where's all the eggs and bacon?" And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, that's not what they eat here, man. You have to learn to adjust to a different culture. You have to
Yeah.
learn, man." So yeah, that was a culture shock for them, but I completely understand, man. It's not something that they're used to have, you know, bacon and eggs every morning, you know?
No.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's fish, sometimes it's something leaner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Japanese, the purple sweet potatoes, man, those things are really good too, by the
Oh,
way.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep. Those Okinawa sweet potatoes, yeah.
Yeah.
Any chance I get, I buy them.
Yep.
Kevin, man, I had a quick question for you, man,
Yeah.
about VA stuff, right? I know that you had mentioned, you know, you went through the VA, or at least in your intro email, you went through the whole VA process and all that. And I'm curious, you know, I'm sure you have, or maybe you don't, some clients who are prior military or who have a VA rating, right? Uh, what happens when they get better? I mean, if they need to get evaluated, you know, is there a chance that they lose that VA rating in your experience?
So it mostly depends when there's two ratings you can get anyway. Like some ratings come back with you have to get reevaluated in 5 years. Others are permanent. If it's permanent, they can't take it away in theory.
Yeah.
So like for me, I have 100%, right? Like it sounds like I'm a lot better, but I'm only the way I am and better, so to speak, because I have to spend so much money on the things that keep me healthy, right? Like I can tell you right now, like, you know, I have psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. If I deviate from my dietary lifestyle that I eat now for too long, if, you know, say I have to for whatever reason, my joints will hurt again, like very quickly.
Hmm.
And it takes much longer to get that to go away again. So I am only as good as I am now because I have that disability payment to be able to afford the higher quality stuff I need. Um, so so there's part of it is this understanding, like, yeah, you may end up being able to overcome and fix some of these things, but that's because of the ability to pay for it, right? Like you have to
Right.
have that willingness to do that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be better, especially when you have chronic underlying conditions. Those chronic underlying conditions will come back. Like your body will remember, and if you eat the same way you did to get there, or you know, conduct your life in that manner, then it will come
Mhm.
back. Your body will remember. So it's because of the things you do, and the things that you do is because you can afford it because of the disability. So it's kind of a catch-22. People think like, well, if I get that disability, I can't work on myself. No, that's why you should, because now you can afford to do it. Like you have this extra income for that purpose. So, and a lot of people too is when they get out, they don't want to get, you know, the ratings or whatever. They don't want to go do it because they're like, well, I don't want to take away from the people who really deserve it, right? Because they think like, oh, this guy, he lost his leg. He really deserves a disability. But losing a leg isn't a life-threatening thing typically, right? Like it sucks, obviously. I don't want to lose a leg. Don't get me wrong, right? But once you lose it, and if they sew it up properly, everything's done right, you know, it's really kind of a one and done thing. But if you have sleep apnea, for instance, every time you go to sleep, you're at risk of dying from that problem. So you deserve it just as much as that next person. Not to mention, as soon as you sign on that dotted line saying you're willing to give up to, including your life for the country, you are allotted, or, you know, the VA is allotted 100% of your disability status in a fund. So if you don't take it, it just doesn't go anywhere. It's not going to anybody else. So it's already there for you if you need it. So if you need it, it's not taking from anybody else other than the funds that were already allotted for you. Another thing a lot of people do, as I notice, is and I thought this for the longest time too, is even though I have a lot of my mental, I call it mental fitness under control now, it's again because of the things that I do and the way I can afford to do them now. But I fought for the long time, even admitting that I had anything to work on, because we're so proud as military people, especially guys, right? Like we're like, I don't have a fucking problem, right? Like, because I just deal with it. Like, well, but you deal with more things than you should. So, for instance, a lot of military people have back problems. You have back pain constantly. That's not normal. People our age don't typically have backs that are that bad. You put up with it because you're just told to, or you just get used to it, whatever. That doesn't mean it's normal. It's normal to you, doesn't make it normal for life. And so you'll go in for this evaluation and go like, hey, touch your toes, and they'll tell you to stop when it's painful, right? Like, but again, we go with that mentality of going like, well, it's not overwhelmingly painful. I can fight through it. So I'll go down and touch my toes. To the evaluator, I have no problem. But what they don't know is that it was hurting while I was standing up straight. I didn't even have to move, and it was already hurting. So that's where you got to go, no, I'm already in pain. Like tell them where the pain is for the evaluation, because once you get the money, I can now use that to improve my life. Use this for me. I use it again for the physical therapist, for the nutrition, for all these different things. I'm getting better because I got that money. If I didn't have that money, I wouldn't be able to afford all the things I do. So you got to get it first.
Yeah, makes sense.
So,
Makes sense.
And with the psychological part, what we don't understand is chronic pain creates all kinds of other issues psychologically, right? Like the fact that you blow up over everything quickly isn't normal, right? Like even if you get it back under control fast, like you're hot and cold, well, that is actually a psychological problem. Like naturally speaking, we wouldn't have that. And you probably didn't have that before you went into the military. So there is some kind of a connection there. You can find ways to overcome that and fix that, alter that, but it doesn't mean it's not a problem. So get evaluated for that. For me, for instance, like I had a lot of anxiety over different foods. Because again, all of the chronic health issues I had, I can't go and eat the same way other people are. So if I get into a situation where I don't have full control over what's on my plate, I still do have a little bit of anxiety. Go, fuck, man, is this going to hurt my joints? Is this going to cause this problem? Like, so I have to stop myself from having these negative spiraling thoughts. That doesn't mean they're not there, right? Like I just have methods to stop them. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's a problem that I've solved continuously, but it's still a problem. So don't be shy about asking for those problems. So I've helped a lot of people get that and go, oh, you know what? Like, and talking to them, they go, man, I didn't even think about that. Like a guy I work with right now had that. He was like, no, I don't have a problem. I was like, dude, you literally told me that when you were getting ready to go to this other facility for just a day, you literally went this weekend, you took a train, you scouted the route, you saw how long it was going to take. You thought like you went through this whole process of like, how am I going to get there? How am I going to do it efficiently? What's going to, all these different things. It's like, that's not normal for most people. I was like that. Right. You did that because you know that you will have such a mental meltdown if something goes wrong and you don't know how to solve it beforehand. I was like, that is a problem you need to ask for help for, right? Like, even if you don't take the mental help, right? Like find a different way, whatever it is, like you still have a problem. You can ask the VA to pay for it. And he's like, shit, I never thought about that. And he's getting evaluated for it now. I've helped a lot of people that way because they just don't want to admit it. They just want to go, oh, no, it's everything. It's like, no, it's there. You just don't want to admit it. And it doesn't mean it's stopping you. It doesn't make you a bad person, whatever. It's like, but you should get paid for it because you wouldn't have it if it weren't for the service. So the service owes you that money to find a way to utilize it to better yourself.
Excellent, man. Yeah, I could not have thought about a better explanation to that, because I get asked that a lot. Like, hey, what happens if we get better? You know, are they going to take away our money? I'm like, they might. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
but I've never really thought about it like that, right? You utilize that money that you get to switch up your lifestyle, change it for
Yeah.
the better, change the foods that you eat, because things cost money. Things are going to get more expensive.
Yeah.
Utilize that money for that. Excellent, man. Yeah. I wrote down some notes on that. So now I have an answer to give people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that whole thing you said about, I didn't even realize that either. And I didn't even cross my mind to think about that. Like when you sign up for the military, I guess, I don't know what point it becomes allotted to the VA, but they get allotted that money to pay for you in the instance that you do become 100% disabled veteran. That's an interesting facet of that whole process. And you're right, man. Like I just did my CMP exam a couple months ago, so still waiting for the resolution on everything. But there was a couple of points in my CMP exam, and it was all about my lumbar and my back and everything else. And a couple of points where he was like, okay, he was going to check the movement and the range of motion. And he was like, all right, so tell me when it hurts. I'm like, it hurts right now. It's like 9 out of 10 right this second. It's like, you didn't move.
Exactly.
Like, exactly. It's the whole point. That's why I'm here, man. So yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah. It's not that you're avoiding to go down and touch your toes, or you're avoiding to do this or that because you don't want to like go outside of the range. It's like literally like if you've got those kind of back problems, and I can speak from my point of view as well, like it just hurts all the damn time. Like it doesn't stop hurting. Even when you lay down or when you stand up, like even if you shift positions, like right now, it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable, but we slog through it because we're tough and we've been conditioned to be tough. And that's one thing that we got to kind of mentally get over. And you're right. It does cause a ton of anxiety, like even just turning your head the wrong way or reaching for something on the shelf. Like you're worried that one movement is going to pinch a nerve and it's going to put you out for 2 weeks and you're going to be laid up in bed. And it's crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, and I think that's actually what opened up the mind for that guy at work was simply that. I was like, because I started thinking about that. I was like, hey, how many things do you avoid because of that? Like, do you do this because of that? Like, would you have normally, before the military, did you freak out like that? He's like, no. I was like, okay, well then the service was part of causing that. Like your chronic pain that you have because of that sets that off, because now like that's one of the few things you feel you can control. You don't control the pain in your body, so you're like, well, only I control is time or this or that. So you try to force that. It's like you live with it, you deal with it because that's what you just have to. But at the end of the day, that's not normal for society, right? Like if you didn't join the military, you wouldn't have that problem, most likely, right? Like, I mean, a few exceptions, but.
Yeah, maybe the guy just likes backwards planning, man. I don't know. I mean, I find myself doing that too. Like, hey, I need to find out what the end result is, and then just kind of backwards plan from there. And my wife is like, "Why don't you just go with it?" I'm like, I need to know how things are going to happen. I need to be prepared for every possible instance that may come across my way. I need to stay at the ready at all times. And she's like, "What the hell's wrong with you?"
Now, just to caveat there a little bit, right? Like, elite performers do still prepare. Well, they want to prepare for that. So there is a little bit of like contradiction there. Is like, as an elite performer, being especially high level, military stuff, right? Like, to a certain extent, that's also needed. But at what point is it like, am I doing it for performance to make sure I have the best performance vice? I have to do it because it's like I feel like I have to control different things. Like, what point is it like cause nerve issues rather than like, no, I want to be the best, right? Like, so there's a little bit of a difference there. Is like where you have to kind of like go, okay, well, am I doing this because I have a desire to do things at top notch, or is like I'm getting a little bit nervous that if this doesn't go right, I may break down or spiral out of control or get too pissed off to control my like, so like you have to kind of pay attention because there is a line there, right? Like,
no, absolutely. absolutely. And I can tell you that it is not because I'm an elite performer or anything like that.
Yeah.
It is because that's just a part of my life.
Yeah.
It just the anxiety bleeds into that, right? And it's like, oh
Mhm.
man, I need to be prepared for everything at all times. And it's tiring, man. It's mentally exhausting.
Yeah.
It really is. So I'm also trying to work on that, like how to just breathe and calm down a little bit, because I'm
Uh,
always like trying to think ahead at all times.
yeah. Breathing practices, if you're doing meditation, will help.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand the nervous system. So and actually just to like really go back when you guys were talking before you brought me on, you talked about driving in Las Vegas and how you were overwhelmed as driving. Like
Oh yeah. Overstimulation. Yeah.
there's actually science to that, right? Like what people don't understand is you're only capable of making so many thoughts and decisions in a day. And when you're driving in traffic, you don't realize how many small decisions you're making. So when you get done driving in traffic, you've probably made hundreds of small decisions.
Micro decisions.
Yeah. So you are mentally tired. Like your nervous system's overwhelmed. And
Mhm.
if you have other things going on like music or any kind of other digital stimulation, your nervous system is completely taxed and it doesn't know it needs time to relax. So you need so for me, I drive now mostly with no sound on because my nervous system has to be able to process the day. Right. So if you get mentally tired like that, uh find a way to just remove all stimulation and do something like this. I don't know, do the dishes with no music, no nothing. Um, Only thing I can do that actually has kind of words is actually have a talk with somebody, like physically talk with somebody. But if I'm listening to music that has words or there's any stimulation at all, podcasts and stuff, like people are like, oh, it's just a podcast. But you're getting stimulated. You're using your nervous system to take that in. And if your nervous system's taxed and tired, it needs a break.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Compound.
Go
And
ahead.
compound that with like the 400 decisions you have to make when you go to the grocery store, and the 300 decisions you have to make when you're picking out clothes, and the 200 decisions you have to
Yeah.
make when you're reading through a menu. Like, yeah, it's you
Yeah.
get mentally overwhelmed really quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can take away some of those decisions, the better, right? So, for instance, for you're talking about decisions of what to wear, do it at night so you don't waste a decision during the prime of the day, or just literally just there's a lot of people if you ever seen Steve Jobs was alive, right?
Yep.
He wore the exact same thing every day. A lot of those guys that are at that level, if you've ever noticed, they wear the exact same outfit. Why? Because there's no decision. Like Mark Zuckerberg, he wore a sweatshirt and jeans all the time. Why? Because that was one less decision he had to make in a day. Because he knew he only had so many decisions he can make. He wanted to use them on something that was more important than my clothes, right? So there is something to be said about that. Like some of those smaller decisions, just don't make them then. I read this book about this guy, this neurosurgeon was talking about because he was a neurosurgeon, right? He's like, I don't want to make decisions on food. So whatever restaurant he went to, he picked number 2 chef special every time. He didn't care what it was. That's what it is. He's like, I don't have to make a decision. That's one less decision to make. The number 2 item on the chef special, that's what I get. Right. So just little tricks like that could help remove some of those decisions and help you be able to actually utilize things on something more important throughout the day.
Yeah, that's why I hate Netflix, man. I'm flipping through all the crap, and I'm like, after a while, I just throw the controller. I'm like, I can't figure this out.
Exactly.
We're watching Only the Strong from 1993. That's what
there you go. Exactly. Those are Rolodex. Pick for me.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is all great, man. Like the way the nervous system and as you mentioned, micro decisions. Like when I'm sitting at work a lot of the times, and right now I work in this cubicle area, and there's people that always stand in front of it and have straight up conversations right there, and I'm trying to read something on my screen, and they're talking, they're having their own conversations there, they're having their conversations here, and I can only focus on one thing at a time, and I'm reading the same sentence 8 times because I don't know what the hell I'm reading anymore. And at one point I got up, I'm like, hey, just shut the fuck up. Shut up. Just please shut up. I told everybody to shut up.
Please.
And everybody's like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? I was like, I can't understand what the hell I'm reading because everybody around me is just talking, and they're like, what the hell? What's wrong with this guy? I didn't mean to have that outburst. It literally was like I was trying to do something, and there was just too much stimulation going on around me, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that has anything to do with micro decisions, but I know it really messed up with my nervous system and the anxiety and just everything. Too much going on around me at one time, kind of like driving down the Las Vegas Strip. I don't know where to look anymore because everything is overstimulated.
Yeah.
So
I had that at a conference one time where I was there, and like all of a sudden, like I realized how loud it really was. Like my system sort of shut down, and I was like, oh fuck. So I just like literally like plugged my ears, I pushed them in as hard as I could so I couldn't hear anything. I closed my eyes and I just focused on my breathing and just allowed my system to calm back down. And then I slowly started letting my ears out so I could hear the noise just a little bit. And then I allowed my system to like take it in and it was relaxed. So in a situation like that, like maybe getting to that where it's like just close your ears, turn off the screens, get all stimulation out, take a couple deep breaths, maybe do a couple quick push-ups on your desk or something, like get some kind of physical stimulation going to clear the mind. Even if it's just like for 2 minutes, just like, hey, let me do 2 minutes where it's like try to get no stimulation or as little stimulation as possible, that it might be able to help and get that back on track.
Yeah, that's all good, man. I'm going to have to look into that. Yeah. Absolutely.
As I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had that too. It happens to me all the time. Like I sit by this guy who's on the phone constantly, another guy who wants to play YouTube like without headphones, and I'm like, God damn, dude! Like, can you just like I can't. Let me just take 5 minutes, man. I got to turn my screen off because I'm like I said, I'm reading the same thing 15 times. I don't even know what it says anymore. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I try to put on the headphones, right? So it looks like I'm completely busy, but there's nothing on. It just covers my ears, so I do that every so often at work.
Yeah. That's gonna be helpful. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I mean, we've hit the 2-hour mark and I think we've covered a ton of stuff. We could probably come back and do a round 2 or 3 on some of this stuff and deep dive. But again, really appreciate you reaching out. Really appreciate you bringing some knowledge and shedding some light on some things that we don't normally get to talk about. And I'm glad we got to have this conversation. I learned a lot. I've got a ton of notes written down as well. So always taking notes, always trying to learn. The green log book is full. So I think we've got a good check mark in that. But yeah, man, thank you for coming out. Hopefully it was good for you as well. And hopefully we got some good information out there to the audience and those of you who are listening or watching. Really hope you got something from this. If you have any questions after the fact, feel free to drop them in the comment sections or reach out. I've got your link tree. It's been in there in the bottom of your tag there, but just so everybody knows, I'll throw it back on screen real quick. If you're looking, this is the link tree. Rise Again from the Struggle is where you would need to Google search and you'll find a lot of that stuff, as well as LinkedIn information, and any of that information we can post it in the show notes as well. But yeah, thanks for coming on, man. And just to give you some time back, because I know we've taken a lot of your time today, but I really appreciate it.
No, I love helping people, man. So like, I don't mind at all. I can talk about this forever, as you can tell. Like, and again, if we could just help one person, that's good enough for me. And if we can help more, even better. So, and especially like I just like giving back to veterans. Obviously, being a veteran myself, being dismissed so much, throughout, a lot of fake patriotism out there. So, the more I can help people like us, the better. And hopefully, at some point, if I can affect somebody else's life, then they can affect somebody else's life, and it just keeps going.
That's right, man. That's
the way to do it. Oh yeah. Excellent, man. Hey, well, it was a pleasure having you, Kevin, man. Look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, and like I say, thank you guys for having me on. And if you need anything, reach out, let me know.
Yeah, man. Thanks. And
all right.
For everybody else out there, we appreciate you on the show and watching and listening in, and we will catch you next time.
All right. Out here.
Thanks, guys.